Community Town Hall, the future of public education, why it matters, spotlights the fight for TDSB schools against Bill 33. Welcome to Regent Park TV, I'm Samuel. Today, we bring you coverage of the recent Town Hall, the future of public education and why it matters. Hosted by TDSB Trustee Deborah Williams, representing Ward 10, University-Rosedale and Toronto Centre. The event held at Native Canadian Centre of Toronto brought together parents, students, educators, and community members to discuss Bill 33 and its impact on local schools. With the province placing the Toronto District School Board under direct ministry supervision, participants raised concerns about funding cuts, accountability, and the importance of keeping education public and community-driven. Trustee Williams and panelists shared insights on challenges students face under supervision, including reduced access to elected representation and limited voice in board decision-making. This panel highlights the ongoing fight to protect community-led public education. For neighborhoods across Toronto Centre, including Regent Park, these conversations are essential for advocating for transparent governance and strong support of schools. Up next, the full panel discussion on Bill 33 and what it means for the future of public education in our city.
We're here today because the arena for public discourse has been taken away from our communities. The school board is currently suspended. The Toronto District School Board is suspended. And the government has a bill that will it will be taken up in the legislature over the next few weeks that may make some of the current circumstances permanent. And this is very troubling. The Minister of Education has also made public comments about even more changes that may be coming before the end of the year. When the elected trustees through the summer met to try and discuss how we could do a meeting like this, we had a number of options, and we wanted to make sure that we put a focus on community voice, student voice, parent voice, community voice. The school board is more than the 22 elected trustees. Without community participation, the school board is just an empty hall. It is the discourse around public education, the democratic conversation that needs to happen for us to make decisions that makes the school board what it is. The board and its democratic mechanisms is over 175 years old, older than Canada as a country. Without a public discourse on public education, the sustainability of our system is going to suffer tremendously. So I will do a quick recap of some of what's gone on over the last few months to get us all a bit of a primer about what's happening and where we're going. I'll take a couple minutes to do that, and then I'll pass it over to the panel so we can hear them and from them about what they think about public education and its value. Also, as we've seen already in the City of Toronto, both in the public board and the Catholic board, as soon as the decision-making process becomes a closed-door affair, you start to see programs being cut, things being reduced, capital projects being delayed or changed. So what we could potentially see is a continued deterioration of the public education system. More central bureaucratic control will remove the programs that local communities have developed over time. One-size-fits-all answer for public education from Northern Ontario to Windsor, including Scarborough, North York, Toronto, East York, and so on, does not make sense. But that's what Bill 33 would continue to push us towards. The bill has yet to be approved, but it's going to be discussed as soon as the legislature goes back to work after the long, long break they've had over the summer. Supervision. So what is supervision? It started at the last day of school. June 27th, the Minister of Education, Paul Calandra, announced four more school boards, one was already under supervision, were being taken over by supervision. In the case of the Toronto District School Board, 22 elected trustees were replaced by a single individual that was appointed by the government. So now a single staff person makes all the policy decisions for the school board behind closed doors. The TDSB and the 4 other school boards that have been taken over through their independent supervision and make up a quarter of all the students in Ontario. Out of the 70-odd school boards out there, we have some of the bigger ones already under supervision. Decisions are being made behind closed doors without any public input. And as we've seen with the issue around having a broadcast for committees taken away, we have less transparency, and that leads to less accountability as well. The supervisor can cut, at the request of the ministry, any change, any program and any policy that they so wish, and they have complete authority to do that, whether or not communities want those changes or not. So how can supervision affect our local schools? Trustees currently have no role in the running of the school board, so there is no local representation. There is no local voice in the decision-making process happening for 1/4 of all the students in Ontario. The community advisory committees are currently either suspended, or if they're meeting, the meetings are held currently without live broadcast. Decisions have been made that are impacting class sizes without information to the public. So decisions are being made without communicating clearly what those decisions are and how they affect our children. And then importantly, the supervisor is not responding to parents or asking for information. So Minister Calandra has said over the last few months that boards are outdated, that we need to start looking for a new model. He's also said that capital projects should be moved to Infrastructure Ontario, away from local communities. And they've also said that the decisions need to be made this year about the future of the governance of public education in Ontario. So with that, I'm going to leave you with a last slide. And there are a number of ways in which the folks in this room can participate. Whoops. So what can you do? There are a number of different groups you can join. And there are some of the folks that helped us organize the meeting today. And one of the silver linings is that we have seen so many people come out of the woodwork to come out and start advocating and pushing back, and we need to continue to do that. The more we do that, the better it will be in the future. So with that, I'm going to pass on the mic to elected Trustee Williams, and she'll lead us through the panel. Welcome.
Thank you, Trustee Dovitiis, our wonderful panelists this evening. So welcome, everyone. It's great to see you all here with us this evening for this important discussion, the future of public education, why it matters. We have a wonderful panel here to have a really engaging discussion. Dr. Sachin Maharaj, Assistant Professor of Educational Leadership, Policy and Program Evaluation at the University of Ottawa. His research explores school board governance, teacher unions, equity in school choice, and student cell phone use policies. Widely published in academic journals, he's also contributed regularly to the Toronto Star and appears in media outlets such as CBC, CTV, and TVO. Welcome. And we also have with us this evening David Lepofsky, the TDSB Chair of SEAC, the Special Education Advisory Committee. David is a Canadian lawyer, academic, and leading disability rights advocate, Blind since childbirth, he served as general counsel with Ontario's Ministry of the Attorney General until 2015, and is now a visiting professor of disability rights at the law faculties of Queen's, Western, and the University of Ottawa. He chairs the Disability for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance and the Toronto District School Board Special Education Advisory Committee. A member of the Order of Canada and the Order of Ontario, he has been instrumental in advancing accessibility legislation and public education on disability rights. Welcome. And unfortunately, our empty seat, our student, TDSB Indigenous Student Trustee just texted me, sudden emergency, personal matter, medical matter. So I'm sorry that she's not with us here this evening, but I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to hear from her and our student trustees. It's a very important part of the conversation to have that student voice, and we look forward to having that opportunity at another time. And Celine does send her regrets. And our last panelist, Bibi Hanif, is a dedicated TDSB parent advocate, chair of the Fairgrove Public School Council, and vice chair of the TDSB French Student Achievement Community Advisory Committee. A mother of 3, including a daughter on the autism spectrum. She champions inclusive education, equity, and community-led initiatives. She helped launch the Tea and Talks, a support space for parents of children with autism, and secured funding for Fairgrove after-school heritage class. Her advocacy emphasizes the vital role of parents in shaping school programs and resisting cuts to essential supports. So, welcome. So we'll start with an easy question for the panelists. Tell us about what you do and your connection and interest in public education.
So I guess I'll start. Thanks everyone for having me. So I've been involved in public education essentially my whole life. First as a student in public schools. Prior into going into academia, I was a teacher in the Toronto District School Board for 14 years, and then a lot of my research now focuses on issues related to public education, as was mentioned, particularly around the work of elected school boards, issues of education governance. But even on a personal level, with my own family, I have 4 children right now in the public education system. And during my entire adult life, I've been both a pretty big critic of what happens in public education systems, but also a really big supporter of the work of public education. And I think that probably is similar to a lot of the people in this room, where, especially the work of elected trustees. I think what motivates trustees is to try to build a better public education system for everyone. So not just being satisfied with the status quo, but how can we work to make things better and serve the needs of more students, while at the same time supporting it from attacks that would seek to diminish the way public education systems function. And one thing I'll really say is that in Canada, but in Ontario in particular, we're a real outlier internationally, in that we have really high levels of enrollment in our public education system, generally high levels of support for the public education system, but there are, if you look at in many other countries, that is not the case. And so when we see attacks being made on the public education system, it's a very tenuous, fragile thing. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind, that the situation that we have here in Ontario is not some sort of natural occurrence. It's been shaped by people like ourselves, in generations going back, that have really stepped up to work together to advocate for the system we do have. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Sachin. We'll go to David Lepofsky.
Hi, everybody. It's a phenomenal honor to be here. I am both a person who grew up through the school system with a disability and the dad of someone in just that situation. So over 2 generations, I've seen the process. As a disability volunteer community advocate, I've been involved since 2009 in trying to get the Ontario government to pass a regulation called an Education Accessibility Standard under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act to tear down the many disability barriers in our school system that impede over 1/3 students with disabilities from fully participating and fully benefiting in the system. Our school system is, through nobody's intention, overwhelmingly designed and operated as if it was first and foremost for students with no disability. The buildings where our kids study, the teachers who teach them, the curriculum they receive, the digital equipment, gym equipment, playground equipment, the overall ethos, the overall bureaucracy assumes that students without disabilities are what they used to actually call normal students. They used to call them that. The rest of us are freaks. And then students with disabilities, they're the leftovers. They get something afterwards. They get something called special education, which is like a big bureaucratic shoehorn trying to fit a foot into a shoe that wasn't designed for them. There's a better way to do it. How about designing a school system for all? How about removing the barriers that impede students with disabilities, teachers with disabilities, administrative staff with disabilities, education workers with disabilities, parents, grandkids, and other family members with disabilities? That's a whole lot of people with barriers to our school system. And it isn't just the buildings, it's the overall system. In the end, this handcuffs our teachers, our educators, from being able to do what we pay them to do and what they want to do, which is to teach all learners. So the way I've been doing that lately is, over the past 10 years, being able to serve, along with a group of wonderful other people, on the Special Education Advisory Committee, or SEAC, of the Toronto District School Board. And last year and this year, I'm serving as its chair. What I've found is that the board's full of people who want to do the right thing. But it is a monumental bureaucracy. And it's a monumental bureaucracy that gets in its own way. It is too big. We have 40,000 students with disabilities or special education needs. That's more students than some boards have as their entire student population. But we don't get the efficiencies of scale. We get the inefficiencies of scale. So I'm driven with my colleagues on SEAC to try to find solutions. Our most compelling opportunity has been to work with staff. If we make progress, that's great. But if we don't, we could go publicly to the trustees, make our arguments, hear the counter arguments from staff, and try to persuade the trustees to go beyond what the staff are recommending in those situations when we disagree. Of course, that avenue has now been completely shut down, and the losers are 40,000 kids with disabilities and special education needs.
Thank you, David. So in the background, being the tech wizards that we have with us, one of our student trustees is going to try to participate online. So that's going to be figured out in the background. In the meantime, let's go to our parent, Bibi. The first question.
Good evening, trustees, parents, and I'm so happy to see all of you and panelists. My name is Bibi Hanif. I'm also the current chair for Parents Council and the executive chair for French Immersion. It's always been a dream to advocate not for my community, not just for my school, for my community as well. I'm like the backbone that holds my community together. As a proud mother of 3, I have my oldest, who is in grade 4. My daughter, she's in senior kindergarten, who's under the autism spectrum, and I have a 2-year-old. My children are the main reason why I am involved in school council. Because when our schools strive, our children strive, and every step we take to support our school is a step forward for a brighter future and our children in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bibi. So we're going to move on. And just a question about how would you describe this moment we're in? What's the main concern from your perspective?
So there's 2 things I'll say in response to that question. So first, I think we need to think about why do we even have publicly elected school boards in the first place? Because it's a kind of strange form of governance that we don't have in other areas of public policy, like say healthcare, for example. Well, the historical reason was twofold. One, it was thought that schools are special. They're actually different than other areas of public policy. And they're special because they're intimately related to their communities. And so the reason we wanted locally elected school boards, and the reason they've persisted for so long, is to give the ability of communities to have a voice, to have an input, to have a say in the way their schools are run. But it wasn't just that. It was that in that process, in the process of engaging communities in schooling, it would help increase the ties that bind communities together. So in many parts of our neighborhoods, schools are kind of the hubs that bring people together, right? Not just for kids to go to school, but for sporting events, bake sales, performances. They're used after school for recreational purposes. There's pools, et cetera, et cetera. And so, if we keep going down the trend that we're going down, the ability for communities to come together, to both have a say in the way schools are run, but the ability to just even come together in the same way is really threatened. The other point that I'll make is the reason that there was this separate model of governance was to insulate schools from regular partisan politics. And once that is removed, then the schools will just become, branches of the current government that's in power. And when there's a new government that comes in power, there can just be wild swings in sort of either direction. And I think we're even seeing that with both the takeovers that have happened and that the changes that are being implemented under Bill 33. It's much more about the current government imposing their particular vision of schooling across the entire province. But the other thing I'll say, the last point, is that what's happening is both not about finances, but is about finances. And what I mean by that is under the current legislation, the province is only allowed to take over school boards for issues related to financial sort of irregularities. And it was painted that these school boards were taken over, were engaged in widespread financial mismanagement. But then when the province ordered audits into these school boards, I mean, you can read the results of the audits, there was no financial mismanagement. In fact, what there was school districts spending lots of money on things for students, right? In Ottawa, where I'm based, it was a lot of spending on special education services for students, right? In other boards, it's related to the issues we have with teacher shortages and turnover and burnout. Also the inability to close underutilized schools, which is something that the province has really handcuffed school boards from being able to do. So there was no financial mismanagement, but it had to be framed that way in order to allow the province to come in and take over the school boards. But with Bill 33, and with potentially eliminating elected school boards entirely, all that pretense will be gone. But why? Why would the province want even greater control of schools? Well, if we go back a few decades, when a previous PC government was in power and centralized control over school boards and removed their ability to raise local funding, it was done to reduce education spending, because they didn't like the idea that schools all over the province would have kind of high levels of education spending, so they took that ability away and reduced education spending. And so that ability to control spending, to have a more back to basics approach, which is kind of the philosophy of the current government, that is how that is achieved, by taking control of school boards in order to reduce funding. And that is possible. We can spend less money on schools, but I think the question is, do we just want schools that are focused on providing the basics, or do we want something more?
I'm going to view this question through a disability lens, though it applies to all kids. We're at a particularly important moment because, in part, what happens in the school boards that are now under supervision foreshadows what could be happening at all school boards if the province were to eliminate local democracy as a form of governing school boards. So it isn't a matter of just saying, oh, well, that's happening to them. It could, and predictably would, happen to everybody. Folks who have kids with disabilities are stressed, overworked, in a state of feeling isolated, constantly having to take on a bureaucracy of well-intentioned but often uninformed people and busy people. And in that situation, they need somewhere to go if they can't get a solution. They need avenues to put pressure for change, either as individuals or collectively when there's an organization of them sharing a similar objective. Putting a school board under supervision like TDSB undermines all of that. And it's a problem that makes an existing problem worse. I'm going to illustrate in a sec, but one of the festering problems I've witnessed over my 10 years at the TDSB is, frankly, the trustees have very little authority over much, because the staff have convinced them that they can't intervene in anything that staff label operational, and everything that a school board does, virtually, is operational. So trustees can talk about whatever they want, but they don't have a say over much, over beyond what they call governance or policy. Now, let me be clear, in my view, these are distinctions that are inventions. They are nonsense, but they've worked. They've worked because part-time trustees who don't have research staff, don't have a party research office, aren't in a position to debate this fully, are outmatched when this happens over and over, and I've witnessed it. And what it results in is, in the case of TDSB, a $3 billion plus board bureaucracy. And I don't mean that in the disparaging way. I mean it's a public service organization which has largely become a state within a state, self-governing in the sense that the staff govern themselves. And I don't think that's a good way to run any public service organization. I don't think it's healthy. And these aren't bad people. And they're people I believe want to serve kids well, but this is just the way people operate in organizations. And the result is what little oversight we could get through trustees, by going to their meetings, by calling out issues, by staff having to answer questions, by maybe being able to get some media coverage when there's a particularly egregious statement justifying a particularly egregious policy. All of that's gone because now the staff report to a supervisor who reports to a minister, and it's all behind closed doors. We've lost all of those checks and balances. But it gets worse when you look at a story that's been in the press for the past week about the experience at the Special Education Advisory Committee. Our meetings are in public. And we are volunteers. We raise issues. We identify concerns to the staff. They respond, sometimes in ways that our members agree with, sometimes ways we don't agree. But for the past 5 years, they've been live streamed. And that's been really important for parents of kids with disabilities who are busy at 7 o'clock trying to get their kids fed and then into bed, and are not really in a position of coming running down to 5050 Yonge Street to watch one of our meetings. But watching it online is a different story. Watching an archived video is a different story. Focusing on a passage that's really important where the link has been shared is a different story. And a couple of weeks ago, I got an email informing me that, as the chair, that the provincial government has directed that no more live streams. Now, you gotta remember, they took over the board because of financial concerns. Live streaming does not cost a penny, even if we had pennies. It costs nothing. So it's not about money. And what did that mean? It meant parents of kids with disabilities or other kids used to have school board meetings, they could go do delegations. Committee meetings, they could go do delegations. Ward meetings, they could go talk to the trustees in public. All that's left for parents of kids with disabilities is the special education needs is the Special Education Advisory Committee. And because of a decision of the Minister of Education, which was his decision, not others, that switch can't be thrown even though it costs nothing. And if you look at the reasons they've given, they change by the interview. At first it's, well, the meetings are public. Yeah, well, that's the reason why you should live stream them, not a reason why you shouldn't. Then we heard, it shouldn't be a forum for political commentary. Heck, they weren't worried about that when the TDSB was run by trustees. When it's now run by, directly by the provincial government, oh, we don't want political commentary. Translation, we don't want criticism in a public forum. Then another one, oh, I wanted to turn the temperature down. Folks, the meetings are actually quite cool. And the minister and his staff obviously had never been to one of our meetings because they'd realized that they are vigorous but respectful. And then there was another one, oh, well, somebody might be watching from some other parent of somebody without a disability, as if it's kind of, I don't know, inappropriately invading. We're talking about, we'd be happy if parents of kids without disabilities were watching our discussion because it would help ramp up more support for the strategies for which we're advocating. It's actually beneficial. All of this shows what happens at this moment that we've arrived at when, in effect, micromanagement of whether our Special Education Advisory Committee meeting is going to be live streamed is now the hands of a cabinet minister. That's why you need local elected control. But what's missing are two things to me, and that's why this moment is really special. I don't think it's productive to just try to defend the status quo, because there are real problems with the status quo. This is an opportunity where we can say to the Premier, good on you for saying that we should reconsider how it's all done, but let's have a sensible discussion about the different options. And I got two. Number one, we should have trustees who actually have some authority, so that the staff, the unelected senior managers, are not a state within a state. And the second thing, Toronto District School Board is just too big. It's absurdly big. No one can run it sensibly. Why don't we divide it up? Doesn't have to be along the old lines. So we have smaller boards. We could have some shared services to avoid unnecessary administrative duplication. But bring the elected voice closer to the people. And then you get democracy, accountability, effective management, and governance that's closer to the people being governed and regulated. To me, that makes sense. Before I pass the mic on, shameless two plugs. Number one, if you'd like to learn more about our advocacy on this at the provincial level, not the Special Education Advisory Committee, I chair a coalition of disability advocates, the AODA Alliance. My SEAC member and good friend, Diane Montgomery, here has a pad of paper and a pen. She'll pass it around. Just print your email address. We'll put you on our list. And if you really want to learn how to do disability advocacy, I have a new podcast. It's called...
David.
I hope you like the content, but the name is Disability Rights and Wrongs, the David Lepodcast. Give it a listen.
I love it.
Okay, good.
I love it. Those calls to action, those shameless plugs to encourage those calls to action. So we're going to go to Bibi, same question. What's your main concern from your perspective?
I had to write down mine, so bear with me. We are living in a pivotal moment for public education, one that defines rapid transformation and deep uncertainty. Classrooms are evolving, technology is advancing, students are learning in new, often hybrid ways, yet with all these changes, one question rises above all the rest. Are we preparing students for the world they are entering or the world we grew up in? The biggest concern today is not just funding or test scores. Its relevance too often we are teaching to the past instead of preparing for the future. We need education systems that value curiosity as much as compliance, that prioritize equally adaptability and purpose. This moment calls for bold thinking, for leadership that listens, for the systems that are flexible, inclusive, and forward-looking. For the future, public education is still being written, and this is what we do right now will define it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bibi. So we're going to have joining us virtually our student trustee, Ahnaaf Hassan. So each school year, the student body elects 2 student trustees and 1 Indigenous student trustee, elected by students to have the student voice. And under this supervision by the Minister of Education, by the Ministry of Education, that student voice, those student trustees have also been sidelined. So welcome, Ahnaaf, and thank you for jumping in for Celine. She did have a personal emergency that she had to take care of. So you're here at the town hall. And if you could, Ahnaaf, just briefly tell us about yourself and how you would describe this moment we're in And what's the main concern from your perspective as a student and a student trustee?
So kind of the main concern that we have right now is just like if students will have resources at all, like, and if those resources will be based on what students actually need. And so that includes special resources that, special education resources, special resources like Center for Excellence for Black Student Achievement, things like that, things that TDSB has that are meant to help students and set them up for life, things that have been helping students for years. And so those resources right now, because of the supervisor, because of all the supervision going on right now, we're already worried that those are in jeopardy. But with things like Bill 33 happening, we're even more worried that those things will be part of budget cuts, especially with issues like larger classroom cuts already happening with budget cuts. We're students are scared to see just like things that matter to them, funding for extracurriculars. All those things are things that we're afraid to see go away because those things matter to us so much. As a student trustee, on the board level right now, I don't have the ability to speak for students or have the ability to speak up for things that we would want to see in the future or things that we want to keep. Because we don't have student voice and the supervisor is unwilling to sit with us, we also have no opportunity to speak with them. And because of that, the only opportunity we've had is through the Senate. And even with that, there's no guarantee that our voice will be heard. And because of that, it's just, we're in a situation where we can't really make sure that with adult trustees, we have parent and community voice being heard, but with student trustees, we can't really voice the issues that we're seeing in schools and that we're hearing from student Senate meetings. Because student trustees aren't able to bring that up to the board, there's no confirmation that those issues that are happening in schools, things that students are going through every single day, the issues that we're witnessing every single day, that those will be held to high, like as an actual issue, and that people will actually take into consideration going forward. And as a student trustee, that's absolutely heartbreaking because we're in this position. We ran for this position because we want to see those issues be addressed. We ran for this position with the promise of making sure those issues get addressed. And we're in a position where we not only can we not bring those issues to light, but we're also being fully silenced, so no student is able to bring those issues to light because the supervisor is unwilling to work with students in that way. Just recently, though, we did get him to agree to come to a student Senate meeting. He, again, though, didn't confirm his attendance. He said he would make an effort to. And even with that, any kind of response from him in general, from trustees as well, has been very hard to get. And that's the only response that we've gotten in general. And that just goes to show how incredibly hard it is to make sure student voice stays heard. And that's just student voice. Community voice in general has just fully been kind of shunned out. And Bill 33, the going forward with that would make it even harder.
Thank you for that, Ahnaaf. That was a clear articulation of the silencing of student voice as well as community voice under this supervision. We're going to move on to the next question for Sachin. Sachin, could you tell us more about what we're seeing play out? What's happening in other provinces and what's happening here in Ontario?
So this is part of a broader trend going back a few decades now, where provinces across Canada have continually centralized more control over schools in the hands of the provincial government. And the main reason they've done this is because school boards are often viewed as impediments to provincial governments implementing their education agendas, because as I mentioned, they're this separate level of governance. And while the provincial governments have constitutional jurisdiction over schools, because you have these locally elected bodies that may have visions that don't align with the provincial government, sometimes there's conflicts. And so it's no coincidence that the takeovers here in Ontario have tended to be in major urban centers where the political orientations of the population don't necessarily align with that of the government in power. So the government in power, most of their support is outside of these major urban centers, and most of the people that serve on the elected boards have political orientations that are in opposition to the current government. And that's, if you look at both in Canada and the US, when there are takeovers of elected school boards, they tend to have that dynamic where there's a more conservative government that's in power and they take over boards in urban centers that have more progressive political orientations. But apart from that, parties of all stripes, both in here in Ontario and other governments, have been centralizing more educational control in their hands because it's just, I mean, it's kind of like with democracy, it's just easier to not have to deal with opposition, and provincial governments find that inconvenient. But I think it's worth noting that in the provinces that have gotten rid of elected school boards, many, if not most of them, have tried to bring them back eventually. So this is what happened in New Brunswick a couple decades ago. This is what happened in Prince Edward Island. If you go in Nova Scotia, where I conducted a bunch of research, when the boards were eliminated, there was a huge outcry, and there was a whole part of the government that's currently in power, their education platform was to bring back elected boards. In the US, in Chicago is probably the most prominent example where they got rid of elected school boards a while back, and they're now in the process of bringing back elected boards because they found that in the absence of elected boards, as you would expect, communities no longer have a voice. The way schools run tend to marginalize communities even further because there's no representation, or the ability of those communities to advocate is reduced. And that's what I found in my research in Nova Scotia as well, is that people who are most closely connected to schools and people who are among the least served by schools as they currently run have just lost their voice, their ability to advocate. So, you know, people will say, like, there's just nowhere to turn to. Some of the reasons that were proffered at the time as to why they got rid of elected boards in Nova Scotia were things like it would increase student achievement somehow. That has not happened. Nobody even makes that argument anymore. They said it would make things less bureaucratic. It's the opposite of that has happened. Things have become more bureaucratic. So when parents have an issue, you know, as David mentioned, like especially particularly in some of these large boards, they're huge bureaucracies. People get turned around in different directions. They don't know who to go to. Their calls aren't returned. Their concerns aren't addressed. And so that's the concern, really, I think, in the direction that we are going, is that communities will lose their voice and things will become even more bureaucratic than they currently are.
Thank you, Sachin.
Let me pick up on this again through a disability lens. I find what the provincial government is doing in this context, when viewed from the perspective of kids with disabilities, is especially just irrational. What's their whole move? The whole argument is, we want the province setting more standards for the boards. We want the province more directly controlling what goes on at local school boards. And so therefore, bring in Bill 98 2 years ago, bring in Bill 33 now, all of these things, and so on. So get this. A number of major disability organizations, including the one I chair, the AODA Alliance, have been pressing for years for the provincial government to pass a provincial regulation that will direct what boards have to do to remove and prevent disability barriers and achieve full participation of students with disabilities and full benefit in school. Not only that, they have a statutory mandate to do this. It's under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. Not only that, the government said they would do this and blasted the previous Wynne government for taking too long in doing this. Well, have they done it? Nope. They have sat for 3.5 years on a comprehensive blueprint of what that regulation should include, prepared by a committee that the government itself appointed that was equally made up, half from the disability community, I was one of the reps that they picked, and half from the education sector, teachers' unions, school administrators, trustees, and they required us to agree 75% vote in favor before we could pass a recommendation. So our blueprint is a comprehensive consensus document. Not only that, but before we submitted it to the government 3.5 years ago, we had to publicly prepare and issue a draft, get input from the community, and review the draft. We did, every single word. We got hundreds of pages of feedback from parents, from teachers, from educators. And there was a broad consensus that we were right in identifying the problems we did, and the direction of our solutions were right. So the government's had this blueprint, they've had the power, they don't need new legislation, they've got us calling for it, there's a broad consensus in favor. Who's against kids with disabilities, right? And it's not all about money. A lot of it could be done that would save money. Instead of having 72 school boards reinventing the wheel, you just have a direction from the province setting the standards. Well, they've done nothing. So their preoccupation now with we need to have more provincial standards, why don't they make them in the area where we're begging for them and have been for 16 years? It just doesn't make sense. Now, let me just add one more thing. That might sound like, well, that there's no role for local trustees. No, there is clearly a role, because once you set those standards, you need to have people overseeing how it's done. But the other thing is, especially for students with disabilities and their families, they need system navigators. Navigating the education bureaucracy is not for the faint of heart. Listen, I got a law degree, a master's of law, I practiced law for 33 years. I find it exhausting. And I speak one of our 2 official languages. I think of the parents who don't have the privilege of the training I got, or don't have mastery of the language, or come from, and don't have the time to do this advocacy. Having someone you could call who has to respond to voters, who can say, here's the problem, can you help me get my way to a solution? That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. I suppose under the new regime, it's all going to go to the education minister. I guess we should all be going to one of those firms of former politicians who, do consulting and advising and lobbying, because we're going to have to figure out, as parents, how to get to the minister, because that's who's making the micro decisions. Or who could be. Maybe not all of them, but could be. It's not the most sensible way to run an education system. Maybe I don't get it. Anyway.
Thank you for that, David. Your depth of knowledge and your advocacy is very much appreciated, and your perspective. So we're going to go to our parent on the panel, Bibi. What do parents need? Tell us about your experiences as a parent and school council chair, and what have parents been asking for?
I have a whole long list.
You got 2 minutes.
I will try to make it short. Speaking both as a parent and a chair school council, it is a role that I uphold, deeply responsible with pride, because like so many parents across our community, I want to ensure that our children are receiving not only strong education, but also the support, safety, and an opportunity that they need to strive. As a parent, I have seen firsthand the power of the public education to shape young minds, but I also have seen where the system struggles. I have helped with fundraising, supporting teachers. I try to create safe spaces where parents feel heard and included. It's rewarding, but not without its challengings. As a school council chair, I have the privilege of listening to so many parents, and I want to speak of what they have been telling me. Parents are asking for more transparency in the decisions that affect our children. They want mental health support to be prioritized, especially as we recover from the emotional toll of the past few years. They are concerned about equity and ensuring that all children, regardless of the background or ability, have access to the resources they need. And they are increasingly asking for a real voice, not just consultation, but meaningful and involvement in shaping the future of our school. That is why our trustees are so important. In my experience, our trustees who engage with us, who listens, shows up to school council meetings, advocate on the board level, makes a real difference. They help bridge the gap between parents and policy. They help us understand a brighter picture, while also helping the board to hear our local concern. When trustees are accessible and accountable, parents feel less like outsiders to the system and more like partners in it. When trustees are if we are able to lose elected trustees, is that connection between the community and the boardroom are disappeared. The consequences would be significant. We will lose a critical voice of accountability. We will lose the locals' lens that ensures policies are not just good on paper, but work in practice. And most of all, we would lose the ability for parents to elect someone who mean to represent us, not bureaucracy, but families, of course. No system is perfect without trustees. The decisions affect our children could become more distant, less transparent, less responsive to the community needs. On the other hand, when trustees are empowered and when they are committed to genuine partnership with parents and school council, the gains in numerous trust is built, decisions are better informed, and our students are benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Bibi. So it looks like I've got to translate the question to Trustee Dovitiis. So for our student trustee, Ahnaaf Hassan, the question I would like to ask is what he was hoping to accomplish in his role as student trustee this school year. You know, during my time on the board, I've seen a number of student trustees come through our board, sit in our boardroom, bring student voice, bring motions through our elected trustees, and actually shape what happens in our school board. So the question for student trustee Hassan Ahnaaf, what was he hoping to accomplish, or some of his goals as a student trustee this school year?
Thank you so much. So I know that this school year it's been incredibly difficult to communicate in general with the director or the supervisor. But this year, even before I ran for trustee, there were a lot of student issues that I had seen in the board and a lot of students had brought up to me. And so a few of those include just one of many being a student newsletter, because students don't really get access to a lot of the initiatives that the board has to offer. And so like a student newsletter would let students take full advantage of what the board has to offer. Another one that we talked about as a student senate, but also with that we as student trustees that we kind of got early on, was kind of mandating that every school have have a certain amount of like food or breakfast available for students, because I know that even talking to the Senate, not every school has the same amount of snacks or food available. So kind of having a set standard so every student has food, and food scarcity is not an issue for students in school and doesn't deter their focus in schools. Some other ones that we had was addressing mental health concerns. Students, especially in higher grades, especially like grade 11 and 12, one of the largest issues that they kind of come across is not having resources for mental health, or not knowing how to speak to their teachers or their guidance counselors about help that they need. And again, segueing from that, another issue being access to guidance. And so one of the other things that we heard was, students aren't able to meet with their guidance counselors because their school doesn't have enough. And that just goes to show, especially 12th and 11th graders going to post-secondary pathways, they need that guidance appointments often to know where they're going in the future, have those plans planned out with them, what classes they need to take, what averages they need to maintain. And all those are super important, but when you can't book an appointment or have trouble getting a spot, that makes it incredibly difficult for you to plan it out alone, especially when the guidance counselors are there because they have experience. There was also talk about having events. So like this is maybe the student trustees, we also wanted to run events with, with student leaders from all across the TDSB. And again, it's going to be incredibly difficult with supervision now because of budget issues. But the point was always to make sure that student leaders are fully involved with the TDSB so that they have supports from internally with the TDSB, and it's not just them kind of working alone in their schools. And unfortunately, having that this year is going to be incredibly difficult. Student Senate, however, does have like a little bit of power over that, but again, there's no guarantee that we're going to be heard because we don't have a seat in the table that makes the decisions. Going off of that, we also wanted to make sure that we had enough of a break for students. There were pilot projects in place that were piloting break initiatives across the TDSB, and they came out amazing. But again, one of our ideas was to make sure see how that could be implemented board-wide because of the amazing success of it. But because of the supervision, I can't even bring that up to the board. Even last year, Student Senate and student trustees were incredibly interested near the end of the year to make sure that that's something that even has a possibility to be implemented board-wide, because now, again, I was one of those people last year that was spearheading it at my school, because my school is the only one that has that right now. But now no other school would have access to it because of the lack of student voice on the board. And so it just goes to show how student voice, if we had it, we'd get so much more resources for students because you have students speaking up for exactly what they need. But because we don't have that right now, just like we're missing out on so much that could have been done because student trustees have the power to get that done. But now that we don't have a student leader who's out there speaking for us and out there talking for what we need on the board, and the most we can do is community advocacy, it just really makes it really difficult for students to get what they need in schools when they need it and how they need it.
Thank you so much for that, Ahnaaf. Again, this is just highlighting and emphasizing the importance of student voice and student engagement at the board level, and unfortunately the silencing of that voice during the provincial supervision. So our next question, we're going to go to Sachin. Sachin, is there a way out of this? What has worked in other provinces, and how have communities organized when successful? What are some good practices?
So I'll draw on two examples. So I mentioned the Nova Scotia example where school boards were eliminated. When that legislation was introduced, a lot of the different stakeholders were caught off guard. So the Nova Scotia School Boards Association, a lot of their members sort of didn't know how to respond. And I guess to their credit, the government at the time did a good job of co-opting a lot of the influential members of the School Boards Association by saying that they were going to create this provincial advisory body and we will give you seats on this new body. And so they were able to gather some of their support. What ended up happening is that body, it was an advisory body. The Minister of Education often didn't attend those meetings, and then eventually was disbanded. So it was a very short-term political strategy to try to build support from some of the school board members. But what also happened was that the school board members and teacher unions didn't really work together in any sort of concerted resistance campaign with any kind of solidarity, because there were a bunch of educational changes at the time and everyone was sort of looking out for their own interests. But that's all to say that today, because there was no coordinated response, school boards have been eliminated. There is no Nova Scotia School Boards Association, and the ability to reverse those changes, while I expect they may happen eventually, it's been very slow moving. It's been 7 years since those changes have been put into place, and they're still currently in existence. By contrast, a few years after that, the same playbook was run in Manitoba. So in 2018 is when it happened in Nova Scotia. In 2021, the government in Manitoba tried to eliminate elected school boards there. But in that instance, the people in Manitoba learned from their counterparts in Nova Scotia. A lot of the, not just school board members, but education union workers were really influential in coordinating some of that. And so what they did that which was different was two things. One is the school board association, along with the teacher unions, other education unions, really worked together, even though traditionally they sit on opposite ends of the bargaining table. There was a real campaign of solidarity to fight this legislation, fight the bill that was introduced. But I think probably more important is that the resistance campaign was very broad-based across the entire province. It wasn't just confined to the major urban centers. It was in everywhere. So in the major urban centers, but also rural parts of the province where the provincial government had a lot of their political support. And so when local representatives were hearing from people in their communities, people who had voted for them into office, that they were opposed to these changes, that had a really huge impact in the way that played out there. And this was a really well-coordinated political campaign. In addition to canvassing, there were lawn signs, public advertising campaigns, that sort of thing, to the point where eventually the party in power basically said, look, we've heard you, we've made a mistake. They backed down and repealed or didn't go forward with the legislation. And so I think that offers real opportunities here in Ontario. We were discussing this earlier, but the current premier doesn't really govern with a pronounced ideology per se. So in contrast to, say, someone like Mike Harris, I don't think he's a really true believer in a lot of conservative principles. In fact, there was this group that had a conference or something not too long ago, Project Ontario or something like that, that is criticizing the government for not being conservative or right-wing enough. The current government, and the premier in particular, if I had to ascribe a political philosophy to him, it would be probably what's called popularism. So not populism, although I think there's strains of that too, but popularism, meaning trying to figure out just what's politically popular and doing that thing, even if regardless of what the kind of politics of it are. So I think he's kind of infamous now for reading public opinion polls and making decisions on those bases. I think that's what's happened recently with the whole speed cameras thing. And I think that offers a real opening here, is that if enough resistance and opposition can be mobilized across the province where it is not a popular position, then I think there's a real opportunity to reverse some of these changes.
Thank you, David.
Let me add a few things.
David,
Yeah,
I'm going to have to take control because we are way behind time. So thank you for those comments, Sachin. It's a real indicator of, call the minister, write the minister, call the premier's office, write the premier, let your voice be known. We have a question at the mic. Trustee King.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for being here. Debbie King, I'm the elected school board trustee representing Parkdale High Park. And just a follow-up for you, Sachin, because I think for those of us that are familiar with what happened in Manitoba, that's been a very motivating story for us, that there was success in pushing back and not seeing that legislation move forward. The legislation is not yet passed in Ontario. So can you expand for us on what would a win look like in this moment? What do you think needs to happen and when for us to have the same kind of success?
Well, there's the short and the long term. So in the short term, as was mentioned, there's Bill 33, which is going to centralize more control in the hands of the provincial government. So a win there would be enough opposition to either, have that withdrawn or some sort of watering down of the legislation through an amendment process or something like that. But that's not where this ends, right? The long-term goals is from the current minister is to eliminate elected school boards entirely. I mean, that would essentially make Bill 33 moot because, that lays out certain conditions for the province to take over school boards, but if there's no elected school boards, there's nothing to really take over anyway, right? Everything will just be more centralized. So I think in the short term, it's about spreading awareness of Bill 33 and the issues that will cause. And I guess getting your colleagues in other parts of the province to realize that this affects everyone, right? Their ability to have input into the way schools are run. And so if in the long term we can see pushback on both Bill 33 and enough pushback to maybe get the province to kind of abandon the plans entirely to get rid of elected school boards, I think those are the two main goals.
Thank you. And I see we have Bruce at the Ontario Autism Coalition at the mic. You have a question, Bruce?
Well, not so much a question, Trustee Williams, but to follow on something that you said about whom to contact and how. Our coalition has led a number of pushback efforts against government initiatives, and the single most effective thing that we have ever done is to get people directly in contact with their local members if that member is a progressive conservative. The reason, and we're already hearing signals that this is happening, is that those people go back and talk to the minister and the premier in office. And when they say they're getting pressure locally, that registers. The minister, the premier have oodles of staff to shelter them from the complaints that the public address to them directly by email or even by phone. They get a total at the end of the day about the number of calls that they've received, and that's about it. But the local members, when you walk into their office, whether it's their staff or they themselves, and they hear that you vote for them and you're not going to if they continue down this path, they listen and they report back, and that has the single biggest impact. I've done 2 tours of duty as a staffer at Queen's Park under, I'm sorry to say, the blue stripe. But I've heard this from Liberals as well when pushed back against them in 2016. It's the single most important thing that you can do.
Thank you for that, Bruce. So David, a minute or a minute and a half for your response from David.
Now we're into grassroots community organizing strategy. Let me give you a few ideas. Number one, apologies to trustees, but you will get painted as if you're trying to protect that huge income they pay you for being a trustee and the tiny amount of time the job takes. I think voters are more likely to get active when there's a clear image in their head of what they have to lose. So it's what will help, and I'm not speaking for the Special Ed Advisory Committee, it doesn't do this kind of stuff. I'm now wearing my AODA Alliance hat. And this is nonpartisan, this applies whoever it is. Number one, parents of kids with disabilities are all over the place. They're all facing barriers. get him to email the minister and then copy you and get permission to make it public. And see what answers they get. When I say email, I don't just say things like, don't eliminate trustees. Ask them to fix their problems. Here's what my child's facing. If the aim is more direct provincial control, hey, minister, you're in control, fix this. And see what results they get. And if it works, heck, what the heck, it worked. If it doesn't work, then it's a depiction of what the future is, and it doesn't work so well. Do you follow me? You've got to, from a busy voter's point of view, it's what am I losing? And what does this mean for me? And I don't mean that in a greedy or selfish way, but turn it into this image that, heck, if you want a solution at your kid's school, you better be ready to hire a lobbying firm to lobby the minister's office, because if you get their attention, it'll get fixed. And if you don't get their attention, well, you got nowhere else to turn. So I just think that those kind of concrete illustrations and not sort of broader policy discussions are more likely to make this persuasive to individuals. And just building on what my good friend Bruce McIntosh went, and you'll not meet a better person for fighting uphill battles and winning than Bruce and his colleagues at the Ontario Autism Coalition. Believe me, I'm in regular awe of their activities. But don't be daunted by the fact that the government has a majority and they're just going to go and steamroll ahead. That becomes the thing that makes most people not get active. Just ignore the sense that it's an uphill battle and get on with it. There are also a couple of other focuses. I would turn to some trend-setting commentators. Martin Red Cohn wrote a column, and his columns are usually thoughtful, but it was the kind of, what do we need trustees for anyway? They don't do anything. It kind of, and listen, he's not a guy who just carbon copies what the Premier says, obviously. But I also think that if the case were made to him by informed folks, that, try to get him to change his mind. And there's nothing better than a columnist who said, hey, I thought this was good, but on second reflection, I was wrong. Back to you.
Thank you, David. So we have a question from the audience. If you could just give us your name and your question.
Hi, my name is Michelle. And hi, David. It's nice to meet you. I've seen you on Question Period on TV. You do a wonderful job of answering those questions. You try. But to this day, and from the years that most of us have gone to school, everything has changed. It's good in a way, but those other things need to come back. And our kids, all our kids are so unique in all different ways. Our kids should not be named disability. No. They're unique children. They show things in different ways that they try to show. A lot of them cannot help that they can't show it as a normal person. We're all unique in all different ways. Has our government forgotten they used to be children at one time, and I'm sure that they went through the school board system maybe the same or a little bit different way. And it's not right. And let's get everything back to normal.
Thank you
because
so much. This
government, for another day, it'll be other words I could say, but not tonight.
Thank you so much for your comment. Is my mic still working? Hello?
Sorry. Also,
thank you so much for those comments. I think we can all agree that students have unique needs that need to be met. We have one more question at the mic.
Yes, my name is Juan Sanchez. I'm a retired community outreach and youth worker from the city of Toronto. I retired in 2019. And I hear the doctor speaking about, sorry, I have to, because I don't bring my glasses, I have to put the light here to read my question, sorry. I apologize, life is so short. And we should
yes,
have
it is.
we should have some little bit, something. You mentioned in 2 occasions about engaging communities into schooling. You also mentioned about interaction in between trustee, communities, parents, more community and parents, and so on. So this question goes for you, for the parents, and for the youth trustee. And go like this. What action tools are you contemplating to introduce, to engage communities, parents, kids, and youth in the process to lay down or mellow down the bureaucratic system? Because I believe, through my experience with the city and growing up 4 kids, and I have now 6 grandkids growing up here, that as unison, all together, you need to contemplate, brainstorming, creative ideas to fight the bureaucracy, but with tool action where you involve the kids, the youth, and the community at large. I have some idea,
yes,
but I want to hear your idea, and I'm going to record it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. So, a great question. We're going to go to Sachin on this one, a minute or less. Response?
So I think this is part of the reason we have groups like student trustees, parent advisory councils for that reason. And so actually I was going to sort of defer to them to talk about maybe their experiences in trying to advocate and overcome some of the bureaucratic hurdles that you just mentioned.
So our parent on the panel, Bibi, just a brief response.
Being part of the Parents' Council, what we do, we do fundraising. We not just create an event. We want to bring the family and the kids together. You know, working hard as a parent, you don't have that time. We want to build this community together. Sometimes we bring in special from Black Creek to come in and teach our parents about garden. Sometimes we bring cooking. Some parents don't know how to do that. So we engage with our parents. We create a lot of engagement. One day we did bingo night. It was a sold out. You can see parents like they want more of this. It's like relaxing, the fun, they're enjoying being that time with their parents. There's so much to talk about. We do at Fairgrove, we create a lot of events. I want to say this one. I want to point out this one. What happened? Because I have a daughter with autism, and it was a recent incident, and I could not sleep at night. Knowing how people can judge you and judge your child because of their disability or their special need. Every kid's unique in their own way. I have spoke with the principal, hey, I want to talk to you because I have something on my mind. I took that anger and make it to something positive, not just myself, but I want to involve the parents. And we have come together of creating a safe space for parents who have kids on the autism spectrum. It's not like, it's looked like something what you call like therapy session, but we don't want to say that. And we have so many parents came out, and you can when they share their challenges that they have been through, I'm, as a first parent, my first time going through this phase, I learned so much from other parents who've been through that phase, and to share that connection. And the parents were there saying, to let that out, how nice they feel to talk to somebody who can listen in their community, and that's what you're engaging. You're bringing people together. You never know what goes on in a family home, and that was one of our huge turnout. And I always wanted to. My dream was to have that on a monthly basis, and I must say we have it continue every month, and it's a huge turnout. Parents love the initiative. They come out, they share, because they go through a lot. Having not just a kid with disability and also having a regular child and a child with special needs, and they share that. They feel like they lift that heavy weight off of that shoulder. So that encouraged me, and I felt so nice that I want to do so much for my parents, and I bring in more things to them to engage with their kids, and that's what I do in my community. Thank you.
Hey, wonderful. Thank you for that, Bibi. So I just want to acknowledge MPP.
The youth, I want to hear his opinion on my question.
Okay. Hang on. I'm going to get to everyone in their turn. I just want to acknowledge in the room MPP Chris Glover.
Okay, thanks so much, Dee, and thank you everybody for being here. So I recognize about half, actually more than half the people in this room, because many of us have been veterans fighting for education for at least 20 and some of us 25 years. And the fight, this is the fight, for our schools. And our schools, what they've done is they've attacked our democratic rights by eliminating the school board trustees. We voted for these trustees. They're supposed to be there serving us for the next 4 years or the next 3 years. And the government's just said, no, you don't have democratic rights around school board trustees. School board trustees were the first experience that people in Upper Canada, when it was a British colony, had of actual democracy. In 1816, the Education Act allowed parents to form a group to elect 3 school board trustees that would raise money to build the school and hire a teacher. And that was the first experience we had with democracy. So what they're doing now is just another attack on our democratic rights. And I'll tell you, as an MPP, as a former TDSB trustee, the thing I fear most of all the egregious attacks on this government, everything that they're doing is guided by 2 principles. They want to hand over our public assets to private for-profit corporations. We're seeing that with our healthcare system. We're seeing it with our colleges, our universities, places like Ontario Place, the Science Centre. All of our public assets and services are being privatized by this government. They're working on education now. This is a major blow against our public education system, and you will see they will start talking about charter schools and voucher systems, which is the road to privatization. And eventually, we won't have a free universal public education system. We'll have a system that parents pay for with their credit card according to their ability to pay. So this is a really, really important fight, and it's part of a bigger fight that we need to wage against this government to protect our democratic rights. Because Bill 5, it's just, there's so many attacks on our democratic rights. We no longer have majority vote democracy in our municipalities. With the strong mayor's bills, 2/3 of city councillors can be outvoted by 1/3 of city councillors and the mayor. Like they're appointing partisan judges. Ford has said, I want conservative judges. I don't want liberal or NDP judges. Judges are supposed to be non-partisan. That's one of our fundamental charter rights. He said that he's going to use the notwithstanding clause again. That strips us of all our charter rights. So this fight that you guys are waging, that we in this room need to wage, it's a fight for our democracy, and it's a fight for our public education system, which is a foundation of that democracy. So I know I've been talking for a long time. Let me just conclude with this one. when Harris was in, and he was also trying to privatize our education system. We mobilized, and we mobilized with unions, with the Campaign for Public Education. Stephen Seaborn's over there right now. We organized with parents, like the Etobicoke Parent Networks, and Laurie Green is over here. We organized with public and Catholic schools. All the little divisions that kept us separate, we breached those. We just brought everybody together into rooms, and we mobilized, and we organized press conferences at least once every other week, sometimes once a week, to raise this issue so that it didn't just die out. And we need that kind of mobilization again in order to protect our public education system. So once again, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dee, for letting me speak. I guess I am a politician. I can't, on something I'm this passionate about, I need at least a few minutes, but
yes,
thank you for giving me those.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you for that, MPP Chris Glover. So we're going to wrap up with one word from each panelist that would describe a public education system that meets the needs of all students. And I remember the question from the gentleman. So, Ahnaaf, in addition to your one word, just briefly, what are students doing to take action? So we'll start with the one word. How would you describe a public education system that meets the needs of all students? Sachin.
If I had to describe it in one word, I would say it's, okay, I'm just going to cheat and do two words. It's an ongoing project. The work of public education is never finished. The work, the advocacy that, many in this room are doing here today, comes from a long lineage of people that have fought hard to build the public education system that we have today. And so if we are going to strengthen that system and continue to go it forward, it's something, going back to my earlier point, it's something that takes deliberate, hard work. And so everyone here who cares about public education, we all need to support each other in doing that hard work.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, David, this is your challenge.
You're asking
a word or two.
A lawyer to say one word? The one word that described me at law school was my nickname, Lepofsky. One anecdote, one incident is more like it. It crystallizes everything. A year ago next month, our Special Education Advisory Committee for the first time held a town hall for parents of students with disabilities or special education needs. In person or online, not using names of students, teachers, or schools, they would each describe the barriers they face and something that should be done to fix it. It went on for 2 hours. It was wrenching. I've done advocacy in this area for a long time. I had a lot of trouble sleeping that night. It was really powerful. Now, we've had discussions with TDSB staff about what could be done to implement measures to address this, but we quickly said we'd like to do this once a year. The parents were so appreciative that finally there was somewhere they could go and talk about this to people who can't change things but can at least try to push for change. Well, last January, at our Special Education Advisory Committee, staff said that staff did not want us holding another public forum for 2 years because they were too busy with the special education review. And I have, at the Special Education Advisory Committee meeting a week ago, which was not live streamed except by my friend Bruce McIntosh, shows you how effective that provincial policy was. I got to ask the Director of Education, would he reconsider his staff's decision? And he said he would. At least he said he would take it back. I raised this with the provincially appointed supervisor. Had there been a board of trustees still in place, I would be coming to you And no doubt the staff would say, oh, but that's operational. But just getting a chance for parents to come for 2 hours and tell us their stories and give us their suggestions. Senior staff at Canada's largest school board said no for 2 years after we did it successfully. There's something really wrong, especially for kids with disabilities and special education needs who face so many barriers. Thank you for including me in this wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, David. And Bibi, can you meet?
You have a one word.
Can you meet the challenge of a word or two?
I will say equitability, truly equitable public education system, inclusive, accessible, and adapted, ensuring that every student receives the support and opportunity that they need to succeed.
Hey, that's perfect. I'm getting a common theme here: equity, accessibility, barrier-free. Ahnaaf, our student trustee, Ahnaaf Hassan, can you give us a word or two? A public education system that meets the needs of all students. How would you describe that in a word or two? And also, you can respond to the question from the gentleman earlier, I remember.
Yeah. If I had I don't think I could describe an education system that would meet the needs of all students in one word, but I could definitely try. It'd definitely be, for lack of a better word, I think safe. Safe for students to learn, safe for students to talk, safe for students to be in classrooms and learn in an environment that's conducive to learning. I think those are all things that would make an education system that's ideal for students. And to address the previous question, I know that how are students, getting involved? Unfortunately, as a trustee and as student senate members, it's really hard for them to get students involved because student senate is the only one talking to the students, and student trustees are having a hard time just integrating into the board. But we still work with student senate, so we're trying to get awareness through student senate because we have representatives all across the board with that. So that's one of our main ways. And on top of that, because we are elected as representatives of student voice, joining things like these, speaking up about the community, doing community advocacy as representatives of student voice, because that's what we were elected to do. That's incredibly important to us, and that's what me, my co-student trustees, and student trustees across Ontario have continued to do about Bill 33. Every single board, from Catholic to public, Toronto, I know at least my co-student trustees and I have been incredibly involved. So, I'm so grateful to have them with me. But students, speaking on behalf of Student Voice, as Student Voice is something we continue to do, and getting students involved is what we're trying to do, individually through Student Senate, through, personal connections, making sure students are speaking up through social media, whatever it is, making sure that, they know what's going on. And that's been kind of what we've been doing. We've been doing to get students involved. Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ahnaaf. Honestly, when I hear from our student trustees and our student leaders, there is hope in the future. There's hope. So just give a final round of applause to our amazing panel this evening, Dr. Sachin Maharaj, David Lepofsky, our wonderful student trustee, Ahnaaf Hassan, and our parent, Bibi Hanif. So, of course, we want to wrap it up with calls to action. I'm going to mention one that was highlighted to me earlier. There's a rally happening on Monday, October 20th at 10 a.m. at Queen's Park, No to Bill 33, organized by Policing Free Schools. So just note that. There'll be, on the screen, there's a number of calls to action and advocacy. If you go to the Fund Our Schools website, you'll see the calls for action there, opportunities to write MPPs. They have a new action, adopt a blue riding. We heard that earlier from one of the speakers. I believe it was Bruce at Ontario Autism Coalition. The importance of having parents and community in those blue ridings raise their voice and their concerns as well. There's also a QR code to the Fund Our Schools website where you'll also see petitions, calls to action. There's a toolkit for school councils. There's a toolkit on how to write a motion with regard to doing advocacy in support of, no to Bill 33. Democracy, not 33, is what I would say. I think I heard it from you, Helen, at one of the rallies. You said it so well. That's what we need. Strong democracy, not silencing community and student voice. So again, our wonderful panel. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and have a great evening. Good night.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on social media, and for more information, check out our website.